we're joined by a great friend of the ACLJ, Senator Marsha Blackburn, does so much great work for the people of Tennessee she represents, but the entire country as well, standing up for our conservative values, beliefs, our speech, and also fighting back against China and focusing on the senator's work specifically against the threat from the CCP. I mean, we've been talking about this now for weeks, whether it's the spy balloon, whether it's TikTok and the technology, whether it's the infiltration on our college campuses, and the senator's got a comprehensive plan.
Yep.
A lot of people have been saying, what should the plan be to combat China in a way that makes sense because we rely so heavily on China?
Senator, I wanted to ask you this because you do have a very specific plan up on your website on how to combat the Chinese Communist Party. But before we get to the specifics on the plan, I think it's important for people to hear from you. You serve on key committees regarding this, and we've got your web address right up on our screen right now at blackburn.senate.gov/China. How big is this threat from China?
This threat from China is the biggest threat that we are facing today. You can look at what they're doing, and I heard you playing the clip. I had said China would never have tried this. Xi Jinping would never have tried this if we had a President Donald Trump and a Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. They knew if they did this, there would be hell to pay. So they didn't even go there. But here is where we find ourselves in this situation. When you look at the economic front, China thinks they have us over the barrel when it comes to active pharmaceutical ingredients, critical supply chain items such as your telecommunications equipment, things that are necessary for many of our electronics and auto manufacturing and rare earth minerals. They think they've cornered the market. This is why it is imperative that we repatriate and bring back and incentivize bringing back some of this advanced manufacturing so that we're not caught without. And I'm sure many of your listeners, Jay, remember when we had the heparin scare with contaminated heparin when we couldn't get antibiotics for babies, and it was because they were all made in China and the factory had blown up. So these are things that we should not put ourselves in those vulnerable positions. Likewise, when it comes to great power competition, what do you see the Chinese Communist Party doing? They're putting spy balloons over the U.S. They are floating TikTok out there to surveil our people and build a virtual you of anybody that is using TikTok. They have your face, they have your keystrokes, they have your patterns. They look at, through machine learning and artificial intelligence, what you're looking at. They feed you more of it. They mimic you online. They own the virtual you. When it comes to bullying Taiwan, Philippines, the Indo-Pacific, the Pacific Island nations, China is bullying them. And then China is carrying out atrocities. The Chinese Communist Party is carrying out atrocities against their own people. You look at the Hong Kong freedom fighters, the Tibetans, the Mongolians, the genocide being carried out against the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs used as slaves for slave labor. These are all things that the Chinese Communist Party is doing. It's documented. We know we're doing it. And they don't give a rip and flip what we think.
Senator Blackburn, how do we get, because I think people, even now, you could purchase a new vehicle and they'll say, all right, we're waiting for this one chip. So the car basically works, but this part of the seat's not going to work till we get that chip. That chip is likely being made in China. And there's a backlog, and we've seen that all through COVID as well. So when you add the backlogs that we see through pandemic, plus that we're reliant on a country that is, I don't think is now any longer just a competitor, but is really a country that looks at us as an enemy. But an enemy they rely on too. How do we bring those technological jobs back? I mean, I think Americans want to do it. They just need to know, how do we do it?
Well, and we have begun to do it with the chips. And Qualcomm, a U.S. company, is your largest producer of chips. Of course, they work globally, but they work domestically also. And investing, companies are going to need to invest. You have states that their economic development departments are trying to recruit some of these chip manufacturers. In Tennessee, we are seeing people trying to build factories to produce battery components and chips and items that are necessary for automobiles. We've got Coors Tech up in Oak Ridge that is very active in this space. But it takes incentivizing it coming back. And of course, I'm one of those that believes you incentivize not through grants and government money and government control, but you do it through the tax code. And you put those incentives on the back end. If they're going to get that tax credit, then they've got to invest that money.
One of the things that you're also working on changing focus here for a bit, and it's something very close to us. You have legislation you've introduced called the Stop Taxpayer Funding of Traffickers Act. And I want to say this. We did a comprehensive analysis for all 50 states on the legal legislation that should be adopted, which most states have now adopted, on this issue of sex trafficking and human trafficking. But this is a huge issue, and it's the Stop Taxpayer Funding aspect of this. Tell us what that legislation will do.
You know, Jay, what we found out by working with some of our organizations that deal in human trafficking, sex trafficking, and also down on the border with our people that are working, our local law enforcement, our CBP working there on the border. Many of these traffickers, these drug kingpins, these pimps, these sex traffickers, gang leaders, they are living in government subsidized housing. They are getting unemployment and welfare benefits, and their side hustle is that they are trafficking drugs and people, and they're recruiting women, grooming women, and forcing them into sex trafficking. And one of the things pointed out to us was that they would be arrested. Then they would go back to their public housing address, and they would continue to carry out their trade until such time as they were pulled into court or convicted and jailed. So we have said as soon as they are arrested, the benefits stop. They're not going to be going home to that public housing. They are not going to be getting that welfare check. They're not going to be getting an unemployment check. It is unseemly that there are those that are living off the taxpayer while they're carrying out something that is killing lives. We have 70,000 Americans that died of fentanyl poisoning last year, and all of that is coming across the southern border. It is being pulled into this country by drug kingpins and drug traffickers and mules, right. And then you have it being made by Chinese scientists.
Senator, we appreciate your hard work on all these issues and enjoy working with you and your staff, and we're going to continue to do that. Thank you for your commitment to standing up for the United States, especially with these foreign adversaries, but also protecting people that are vulnerable and with the sex trafficking legislation that you're putting forward.